Welcome. My name is Mark Blatstein, the physician founder of Physician Pre-Sentence Report Service. Today is the day that we're going to discuss pre-sentence interview preparation. And so initially we were talking about anti-kickback laws, public corruption, bribery, fraud, PPP, wire, bank fraud, money laundering, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid fraud. Department of Justice is an equal opportunity agency. They don't care if you're a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, executive, CEO, pharmacist, it doesn't matter. Your counsel knows the law. But the nuances of preparing for your pre-sentence interview, a lot of it's going to fall on your shoulders. They go through it every day, but it still falls on your shoulders. And confronting unpleasant realities is the nature of the game. You have to do it. I mean, there's no way around it. And I'm telling you all this, and the main reason that I moved from patient care to do this is because I was unprepared and I was in a constant state of panic. And so, to steal from Nike rather, just do it. You don't have a choice. Now is the time. Participate in your defense. Whatever you do now matters. Your attorneys know the law. It's going to be any kickback. I'm not a lawyer. Public corruption, bribery. I'm not an attorney. Fraud, PPP, wire, bank, money laundering, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid. The DOJ indicts equally, except if you're maybe president. They don't care if you're an executive, CEO, pharmacist, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, though, that most, not all, defense counsel will know almost nothing about the nuances of what happens or how federal prison, the nuances of federal prison, how to get in, what happens inside, or your personal background and how to get that information out of you. How did you get to this to this point in your life? It's up to you to be able to get this information on your background to your lawyer, and they will need it. May not know how to ask for it. And the only way you can get that to them is for you to sit down and begin to draft early on, like yesterday, your personal narrative, which is your story, your autobiography. And you probably want to read, you don't want to read, but you should read your indictment, which is your autobiography written by the Department of Justice that they published for you. And they didn't ask for your, okay. They just did it because your attorney is going to need your background information because they have to write what's called a sentencing memorandum. And in that is going to be what's called U.S. Code 3553. And it makes up what legally they call nature and circumstance and personal history and individual characteristics. It has to do with your involvement in your charges. But if you write your narrative out as to what brought you to this point in your life today, and you can go all the way back to childhood and just kind of walk your way through life, you will have all the information there that will be needed both by your attorney and that makes up the actual pre-sentence report. And so Title 3553 states the various factors the judges must consider when determining the proper sentence for a given offense. Among the most pertinent considerations are nature and circumstances of the offense and your personal history, individual characteristics. Again, if you write out and you may need to have someone with you, someone who does this maybe professionally, myself, someone else, someone you trust, someone who's not an enabler, that would help you. Sam Bankman-Fried, really, his attorneys wrote a great narrative for him in their sentencing memorandum, which I did a LinkedIn article on. The problem is that when it's written in the memorandum, the judge doesn't even look at it. Or if they do, they don't give it any credence because judges know that attorneys are paid to say nice things about their clients. It wasn't like the client or the defendant or Sam Bankman-Fried wrote it himself. These factors help ensure that the sentencing decisions are fair and just and that the punishment fits the crime. This is your opportunity to provide your story, autobiography, or narrative of your life and what brought you to this day. Accept responsibility, have remorse for the victims you created. Now, you may feel in your specific instance that there's no victims. In the courts, among judges, there's always a victim. If you think there's no victims, give me a call on the phone. I can identify a victim with you pretty quickly. Your indictment wasn't an easy read. It wasn't for me either. I mean, I thought I was Jimmy Hoffa. We can read it together. Writing your narrative. It isn't easy to face our inner truths, demons, or what happened. It may take a third party to discuss what happened or act as a sounding board. Someone who will be truthful without making you feel inferior, but is not an enabler or a yes person. What is essential is to start yesterday, writing everything that comes to mind. And if the story begins from childhood, so be it. The length does not matter because it likely will be rewritten several times before you take responsibility. You've taken responsibility. Have understood that there were victims. There always are per the courts. You want to make amends to them, your family, as well as to never see this courtroom again. Sound familiar? If parts of this ring true or are true, and you now feel that you want to consider a trial or an appeal, consider asking your counsel how many trials or appeals have they won. Then, are you still prepared for a harsher sentence should you lose? This is a strategic question. It's not a trick question because remember, the Department of Justice has a 98% conviction rate. So you want to ask them how many have they won. You also, you want to go somewhere. I have a link here for the page, and maybe I'll pull that up before I turn this YouTube off. of 14 questions where you want to ask, as you're interviewing attorneys, how many cases have you won? Do you only practice in federal criminal court? Do you have experience in practicing federal criminal defense in federal court? The part of your pre-sentence interview preparation, your probation officer may request the copies from this particular list, and this goes to my website. And I did it, so that it was an orderly fashion: divorce decrees, financial records, birth certificates, immigration. You can read that on your own, all on this particular blog. If you have a medical chart, this is important. You want to have all your records. You want to have all the doctor records. You want to have copies of all the surgery reports. You want to have copies of all the pathology reports. You want to have copies of all the reports of all the diagnostic x-rays, EKGs, MRIs, and you want to get them on CDs in addition to the reports. Because when I was in practice, I would always get the report, but I'd also get the CD. Now, recently, as in the past number of years, everybody has the ability to have a portal, so I can go online and see it. Well, there's no portals once you go to prison, so you're going to need a CD. They may not let you take it, but they may. And so you want to do that. And while we're at it, you want to make sure that if you're taking medications, all of your drugs are on the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons drug formulary. If it's on the drug, if your medication's on their non-formulary list, you're not going to get them. And you have to prepare for that. Now, to humanize yourself to those who hold your future in your hands, and then there's the topics: personal narrative, elocution. This is my experiencing with, appealing something, not lessons learned. And again, I repeat myself by saying almost everything here is because I learned this the hard way. Release, planning, character letters. Why write a personal narrative? People recognize brands. You recognize this Nike's logo, just do it. I took it here for this particular YouTube. Tesla's little logo for their cars. Even the Olympics have their little rings. Department of Justice has already published your brand or narrative worldwide, and they did it in the form of your indictment, and they didn't even get your permission. Do you agree with how you were portrayed? Does it represent the best version of who you are? If you do nothing, your judge will have no choice but to sentence you based on the four corners of that document. If you're like me, it wasn't that flattering. But if you choose to take it the time with the help of others, possibly those who are familiar with the process, myself, if you will, and develop a well-written narrative in which you've accepted responsibility and feel remorse who are familiar with the process, and develop a well-written narrative in which you've accepted responsibility and feel remorse for the victim's harm without making excuses, these are steps in the right direction. And on my front page, you can see the two examples of two clients where I work with them and they got good results. This is the most important essay or autobiography of your life story. And hitting specific target points is crucial to humanizing yourself to your current future stakeholders. Here, you get one chance to make that great first impression, period. There is no do-overs. If you're still confused, there's my contact phone number. Consultations, no charge. First one, 104, personal narrative. This is Judge Mark Bennett, federal judge, being interviewed, and he gets annoyed if the memorandum. He gets annoyed when attorneys use either Booker, these are case studies, if you will, or just uses these particular codes from 3553 in the attorney's memorandum. And he explains in the video that for defendant, that if you have a well-written narrative included in your pre-sentence report, he considers that a great idea. He never thought of it. And he put this on a video. Attorney Alan Ellis has interviewed federal judges across the country. Along with federal Judge Bennett, there was a heartfelt believability in the allocution where there was accepting responsibility and apology, remorse for actions taken, and a plan to never return. Character letters from those who have known the person for a long time, could be from anyone in the community. There was an agreement that their most challenging cases were predatory child offenders harming children and white-collar offendings harming vulnerable people. Regarding mental illness, show me that they were not a con artist, sociopath, or psychopath. Lawyers needed to be credible. Candor is good, and acknowledging that the crime was heinous and also important to the court. Developing a reputation for realistic sentences, not those that are ridiculously too low. The allocution, 204, second part. A lawyer, through thorough preparation, is essential to humanizing their client, crafting compelling narrative and allocution, preparing them to speak with their judge. If they are unable to do so, then other options could be written, PowerPoint, video, or in-person contact-wise. Judge John Levy of the District of Maine in Portland emphasized the significance of the defendant's post-apprehension actions. This includes whether they were engaged in rehabilitation programs or provided valuable services while in detention, such as teaching fellow inmates new skills. In addition of pre-sentence release, the judge seeks information on whether the defendant has made amends or restitution, engaged in employment, received mental health or substance abuse treatment, and demonstrating meaningful efforts to redirect their life. Judge John Adams of Northern District of Ohio stated a defendant's statement during allocution is generally more crucial than what a lawyer says at sentencing. I prefer the defendant to take responsibility for his actions. Judge Adams demands that defendants refrain from wallowing in self-pity. He unequivocally stated the defendant must commenced their allocution with a sincere apology to the victims. Furthermore, he emphasized the necessity of defendants taking tangible actions to make amends for the harm caused to the victims, particularly in cases of white-collar fraud. Additionally, he adamantly expressed his frustration when presented with a pre-sentence report indicating that the defendant has squandered substantial amounts on luxuries and now claims inability to meet their restitution obligations. Your allocution, and these are YouTube's, I'm not going to turn them on now, you can see them all on my blog. Your allocution develops from your narrative. During the judge's conversation with you, in addition to covering the points below, he or she may want to know your plan to not return to their courtroom. Believe them the first time. I didn't, and I'll go into that shortly. Overall, judges look for a sincere demeanor, discussing what taking full responsibility means to you, acknowledging that there are victims, even when the pre-sentence report indicates there are no victims, as it does in most drug cases. A more impressive allocation details how the defendant's criminal contact affected them, an expression of genuine remorse, a plan to use prison or probation time productively, discussing why the defendant wants to change his or her criminal behavior. Perhaps most importantly, information that helps humanize the defendant and the defendant's role in the crime. Again, importance of your narrative. Tell the story, but don't minimize the seriousness of what you did. Judges sometimes ask defendants what they will do to reduce their need to reoffend. Again, your narrative. Show his or her strengths and weaknesses. If you can show that you and the court agree on the seriousness of the defense, the chances of the court accepting your other statements will increase. We're going to deviate. My sentencing being prepared, I wasn't. My mistakes as proof of concept on the day of my first sentence, 3 lessons were not learned. 1, the judge asked me if I had anything to say or what my plan was to not return to this courtroom. Nobody ever told me I was going to be asked the question by the judge. I didn't know. I just stood there like an idiot. I said, I'm sorry. Next, the judge said that he didn't want me to see me back in his courtroom. Again, I agreed. I mean, I wasn't coming back to their courtroom, but at the same time, my attorney and I asked if I could appeal the indictment. And the judge agreed. And again, I assumed that, either 1, I would win on the indictment. I didn't know what winning meant, or 2, I would lose. 3rd, I was wrong again. He did not want to see me back in that courtroom. So I didn't understand that there was there was door number 1, win, door number 2, lose. I didn't realize that there was a door number 3. So I went into a prison camp and it came out. And then I went back to court and went back to my second sentencing of the appeal. And after I went in, all of a sudden the judge denied it. He opened up door number 3 and I'm thinking, door number 3, where'd that come from? And he said denied, and he sent me back to prison. And I'm like, my head was spinning. And so this is where I learned the difference between a freestanding camp, prison camp, and a satellite camp, which I will address at the very end. Release plan. Again, all of this stuff I learned either while I was in prison or when I got home and subsequent years. If you're reading this for the first time, it can appear both overwhelming and premature. Both of them are right or correct. But at minimum, giving this a little thought is a good start. I wish I had learned more of what I'm providing here early on. So please pick and choose what you feel you are comfortable with. The release plan I've formed out here is divided into 6 parts. If you started early, then before your interview, and it's provided along with your narrative to be woven into your pre-sentence report. And before your sentencing hearing, building of what you first provided before your pre-sentence interview. Once inside really is where it grows, primarily by documenting your personal development growth, which basically is you need to document everything that you do when you're inside, which includes all your cases, all your first step back programming, everything that you're reading while you're in prison. Essentially, I'm going to try not to skip over this, but I'm going to summarize by saying we all have insurance. We have home insurance, auto insurance, you have life insurance. We don't like paying it, but we're glad we have it when you do. If you go skiing, break a leg, you're glad you have it. If you're in a big car accident, or your wife or lover, or loved one, or kids, you're glad you have it when you need it. If you have some sort of journal type book, and I have one ready to print with Amazon, there's too much on my plate. But there are journal type books that you can get from Amazon. They need to have some sort of writing, inspirational writing, something inside. But you need to keep track of everything you do. You have a meeting every time you take a first step back class. Write down. I realize that the BOP keeps a copy for them. Good for them, because you don't want to rely on the BOP, who's still not able to, as of this is September 12th, that they're still not able to calculate their auto calculation for in-time credits. You need to keep track of everything that you're doing. If you have an interest, you need to begin preparing for have an idea as to what you want to do once you're released. And this is a whole different YouTube conversation, but you should start having books around different topics that you're interested in sent into you so you can begin reading it. It's therapeutic. It takes your mind outside of the prison. But you need to be doing constructive things when you're inside. And then as you read, make notations on things that you're learning, things that you want to keep for thereafter, because otherwise you'll forget them. Trust it. I forgot them, and I read a lot. And I read things that were, were good for me to read, and things that were like junk things for me to read. But you want to track everything you're reading, because every time you go into a meeting with your counselor, your case manager, you want to have a copy in this journal you're keeping that you're going to make copies of and bring to them so that you can show them, this is for my file, please. And you can tell them or not tell them what it's for, but with the idea is that you're keeping a record of everything that you're doing. And we can go into why that's a whole nother YouTube. If you have a meeting with a correction officer or a staff person, everything goes into this, so that if there's a problem or you're challenged months later and they say, well, we don't have a record that you did this, this, and this, you can pull out your journal and say, yes, I did, and here it is. And everything is chronologically entered there by date. It's not like you went back in and flipped through the pages and added a different entry, inserted it into the journal, into the date. It's just not practical. And so this is your insurance, and it's your life insurance. Literally, it's your life insurance. And so back to this. And so I said the primarily documenting your personal developmental growth, which includes first of that programming and everything instructive you've been working on in areas of interest. There's this case in the website, Saria versus Jaquez, example of what the reason you need to document your first step credits. What I pulled out of the case is that the person believes that he had 365 days worth of credit. He believes the BOP said he only had 75 days. The gentleman in question the person in question had many more issues than just this. And so I don't know that this is an appropriate example, but this is what I'm using right here. Before release, you need to provide additional details. And this can be gotten by opening these up. And this, for example, I will open up this here. And this is a whole pre-release in handbook where it just tells you different things that you can go ahead and enter. And so, this should all be available. It'll have things that you'll need to put in there for halfway house, where you'll be going. It's itemized, and you can get all this on my website. After release, post-incarceration, you're still while you're in the halfway, you're still under the Bureau of Prisons. You don't want to get to any kind of trouble. The residential reentry house manager, how they pick people, there's not enough halfway house beds available. And so it's not a fair procedure. You can be doing everything right. There can be two people standing side by side in prison. You can be doing everything right, taking all the classes, keeping up on all your journaling, and somebody else next to you can be doing nothing right, and they get to bed and you don't. And they don't have a good answer for you. And the flip side can also be true. And so I don't know what to say, but you want to be the person doing everything right. But to continue, from any BOP custody, until you complete your term of imprisonment for greater than last 6 months. If you're in the residential reentry center, halfway house, or working with the BOP's community corrections management. If you're eligible to transfer to home confinement, that's in the last 6 months or 10% of your sentence, whichever is less. Unfortunately, they're not keeping up with this. And so, there's other YouTubes, and you can go to Lisa Legal, which also has lots of articles for that. Supervised release, parole, or halfway house. If you think you're out, you're done, you're not. You're still under federal control. This part can be very hard. You don't want to make any mistakes. Don't want to assume. If you have questions, ask your probation officer or residential reentry manager first and often. Not hearing back from them is not okay. You don't want to do something you're not okay to do. You want to get it from them in writing. Some are harder to deal with than others. And if it's a state charge and it's not federal, this may even be harder. Supervised release on probation. For some, this can be the hardest part. Probation or parole representing approximately double the amount that are incarcerated. These are some nasty statistics. And so you just want to do your best to not stray, because while you're on supervised release, anything can get you in trouble. And you can read this, but these are just some nasty probation or parole can just send you right back to, punishment beyond parole. You go to my website, you can see these. They're not good statistics. Not that, forewarned is forearmed, which is why I have this here. Character letters. They include the fact that these letters have to include the fact that they know you have broken the law. They've known you for a long time. They can come from family, friends, community, religious leaders. They're not offering sentencing recommendations to your judge. Should an employer be willing to write a letter that states they are willing to rehire you after release from prison due to your character and skills? This is a great letter and should be included in your pre-sentence report, in your attorney's sentencing memorandum, and in your release plan. They may write, I know that he or she won't be back to this court because we will be looking out for them in the future, holding them accountable. Halfway house job letter can also include, they know that you're going to prison, that you have just been released, and they're willing to hire you. Your job will keep you in one place where probation can call or just show up and find you. Your pay will be X number of dollars per hour, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and include your manager's name, phone number, and states that they can speak with you with the halfway house or probation as needed. How they know how long they've known you, and what they think of you. Who do you ask? Relatives, religious leaders, volunteer organizations, or employers, especially if they're willing to rehire you. Because character letters, and keep reminding the people you're asking, and pick the 10 best. Then give them to your lawyer at one time. If you have a lot of letters, what you want to do is, let's say you have 50 letters. You want to pick the 5 or 10 best for your attorney to turn in to the probation officer in one lump to go in with the pre-sentence report and the sentencing memorandum. Then the other 40 can stay with the probation officer to be attached maybe to the sentence memorandum to go in it's just as an appendix or an attachment. And you want to start repeatedly asking for these things ASAP because people get busy in life. Stakeholders. Stakeholders are basically, these are the people responsible for your life, for your future, for during your incarceration till you come out and you're done with, they are responsible for everything that you do. The courts, your judge usually already has a sentence in mind by the time you get to your sentencing hearing. If your narrative was written and embedded within your pre-sentence report, your judge will likely have read it and learned more about you than just what was in the 4 corners of your indictment. Depending on your narrative, judges across the country agree that they want to hear from your defendant, from you, because crimes they know don't happen in a vacuum. Judges want to know why. After learning the why, do you take responsibility for your actions? Do you have remorse for the harm caused to the victims of the crimes you've perpetrated? Your attorney, if you've taken my advice, you've asked them many questions and found counsel that you feel is a good fit. This is a link to that page. Should you have discussions covered the topics of plea versus trial? Hopefully they've been candid and your expectations realistic. At this point, they know nothing about you personally or your background other than your charges and what you share with them. Please do not lie, as the only person who will suffer is you. Beside your charges, they will only learn more about who you are if you first draft a well-written narrative. This may help in your defense. The probation officer who conducts your pre-sentence interview is the most important you will meet, period. Why? While the probation officers are overworked and have no time, they also have the ear and respect of your judge. So if you can share your story with them successfully, that's a win. Ideally, you want everything provided to the probation officer 1 to 2 weeks before the interview, organized and spell checked, providing everything providing everything they have requested, including your personal narrative release plan, and at max 10 of the best character letters. If done right, your narrative should contain all the information your officer will need to fill out in their pre-sentence report worksheet. Well-written, a personal narrative should contain all of the information your officer needs. Why? Being overworked and having no time, some may appreciate counsel's effort in organizing everything they've requested and providing it to them early. They can now take their time to fill in their probation report worksheet. Then, on the day of the interview, they'll have time to get to know you personally and ask any remaining questions they may have. At the end of their meeting, the probation officer may feel that the defendant took this seriously, leaving them with a more positive view of who you are, different from the person referenced in their indictment. It provides information about the offense for which the defendant is being sentenced, acceptance of responsibility, and a victim remorse statement, release plan, and where the sentencing guidelines may apply. This includes background information about the defendant, such as criminal history, education, work experience, family background, and health history. A realistic sentence recommendation and BOP placement request could also be included. The prosecutor will still want to convict you to protect society, but may be swayed by your narrative. The Department of Justice will still want a conviction. The judges understand that crimes don't happen in a vacuum, and they already know what your attorney wants for you to have no prison time. And the Department of Justice, the prosecutor, want you in prison. The only person who they do not know is you. And why did these events occur? What happened in your life? All they know is what they've read in the pre-sentence report and your indictment, unless you take the time to write a heartfelt, well-written narrative. Who are the stakeholders you may meet, but also you may never meet, but also impact your life? Those that provide security designations. These are made by the BOP Designation and Sentencing Computation Center in Grand Prairie, Texas. Their decision comes from your efforts through your pre-sentence report. Medical designations, their decisions also come through the pre-sentence report. For medical care levels 1 and 2, comes through the Sentencing Computation Center, also in Grand Prairie, Texas. For medical care levels 3 and 4, they come from the Transportation Center, also in Grand Prairie, Texas. Stakeholders internal, BOP staff, warden, unit team, and case manager. The case managers and unit teams, these are employees, and they see hundreds of inmates, if not thousands. So how can you differentiate yourself? Demonstrating that you stay out of trouble, do your assigned job, attending the first day classes, and doing other constructive work by reading nonfiction books, teaching a course, documenting everything you do. These are ideas I learned from others. Are you an artist? That's important, as long as you have a constructive interest that can lead to a career after release. These are a few ways in prison to demonstrate individuals' personal growth and development and prepare them to re-enter society as law-abiding citizens. However, using your time constructively is essential, as BOP staff will observe you daily. Eventually, you'll be released. Will you need to work? What are your interests? Is this too early or premature in your sentence to consider this question? Honestly, no. Are you a high school graduate? If not, getting your GED. If yes, get a college degree with a second chance Pell Grant. If you've already graduated from college or grad school or built a successful business, consider teaching a course and giving credit to your case manager. In the meantime, use your time constructively. Read to Learn, which is a nonfiction on any topic from painting to computers, history to philosophy. And if you're serious, which I hope you are, write down the parts that interest you for later use. Halfway house managers, they also have a tremendous sway over your activities. Freestanding federal prison camps. These are not associated with higher secure facilities. Satellite camps are on the same compounds as higher security camps, as they are on the same compounds as higher security facilities. They usually provide much more programming and medical services. Due to the higher security facility, that atmosphere is likely to transfer to the camp. Although this is your first time, you'll likely be unaware, but violence, as rare as it may be, became evident with a gun failed to fire at BOP FCI Tucson in 2022. Comparison. Unfortunately, I've seen both, so I am biased, but not in a good way or fair way. At FCPC Pensacola, there were very few lockdowns and no razor wire. At the satellite camp Cumberland, I was immediately put into isolation to shoot due to my court's paperwork not being there. Possibly a rare occurrence. Lockdowns, though, were all the time. Fog, okay, but primarily disruptions at the medium, fights, stabbings, etc. The guards, I think, rotated, as there was always a heightened atmosphere of security, but that could just be me psychologically comparing two facilities back to back. Razor wire, yes. Inside to follow, meaning that I'll do another YouTube on what it's like inside. I hope you have found this helpful and that I didn't repeat myself too much. Stay safe, and I thank you for taking the time.